I have an MS, half of an MBA, and a CVA, and I do highly recommend everyone to get the CVA. Just studying for it was a great wealth of information, learning to get the CVA. Before I came here, I worked in healthcare and in a nonprofit, and I was the volunteer director there. And I actually created the volunteer program for a new hospital built in the Chicagoland area. And I built it from the ground up. So I do have lots of experience in volunteer management. And 7.5 years ago, when I came here, there was no director of volunteer services. There were volunteers all over the organization, but no sort of cohesive program. So I've done a lot of building of the program since I came here. And one of the things that we're going to talk about today is the corporate group program, which is one of the things that I built after my first couple of years here. I do like to share the things that you will hopefully take away from this. And at the end, and actually at any point, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. But what I'll talk about today are steps to building corporate engagement, building your strategy, the benefits of developing this type of experience for volunteers that will impact your organization, and keys to success and lessons learned. And I left hard out. I learned a lot of hard lessons when I went through this. So if I can spare other people some of those hard lessons, that's my hope for today. So a little bit about our organization. I think it's helpful to know what we're about and how our corporate engagement kind of came about through the work that we do. We are San Francisco AIDS Foundation. We are about to celebrate our 40th anniversary. We're one of the most respected and influential AIDS organizations in the United States. It's iconic. There are movies about our organization. We here in San Francisco were at the forefront of the AIDS epidemic 40 years ago. And so we were born out of sort of this need for the community to care for itself because the rest of the world wasn't caring for itself. And it was born out of through volunteerism. So it was volunteers coming together who actually started our organization. Here we are 40 years later. We're a $45 million nonprofit serving 25,000 people in our community annually. People do come from other parts of the country, other parts of the world to see what we're doing here in our community. Our work is, we're always on the cutting edge, and our work is really kind of important in the AIDS arena. And our mission is up here. We recently adjusted our mission. And so we're really working on social justice and how that impacts who receives services, who's getting appropriate care in the HIV world. And so our mission is now that we promote health, wellness, and social justice for communities most impacted by HIV. And we do this in a lot of ways. So we provide sexual health, substance and behavioral health. We provide services for long-term survivors. I like to talk about that one because what's really beautiful is that there are longtime survivors. So 40 years ago, when I was a young person, I had friends who contracted HIV. And essentially when they said they had HIV, you knew that that was a death sentence and they were going to die. So in the 80s and 90s, it was pretty much a death sentence. And I did lose someone that I knew to AIDS. Fast forward, 30 years ago when I started getting involved in this, 30 years later when I started getting involved in this work, and I have many, many HIV positive friends now who will live as long as I do, will live a long life and probably outlive me. So what's interesting though is that a lot of those people that contracted HIV in the 90s did not expect to live. And so there's a lot that there's a lot to being someone who's lived for 30 years with HIV. We have all kinds of services to support that community. And then because COVID-19 is not the first epidemic in the country in 100 years, or this influenza virus. The flu that happened in 1918 was 100 years ago, but people tend to forget that there was another epidemic that happened 40 years ago, was the HIV and AIDS epidemic. And so we like to remind folks of that and share that because our organizations like us know how to respond to an epidemic, we were leveraged in our community. And I'm sure a lot of other HIV and AIDS organizations were leveraged to address kind of the COVID response in our community, because we did have the skills and the tools kind of and the experience in dealing with pandemics. If you don't know about HIV, it's not curable. It is still not curable, although 3 people in the world have been cured. Those people also had cancer and had bone marrow transplants, but it is still incurable. However, there's medication that you can take that daily that prevents you essentially from having all the illnesses that typically led to death in the past. Here in San Francisco, we have a couple of different locations to serve our community. If you're ever in the San Francisco area, please look me up. I will hook you up. I will take you to the best places. We just learned that Pride is happening in real life again on the 25th and 26th of June. So we're super excited about that. But we have this really iconic location in the Castro neighborhood. Our sexual health center is there. That's the one that says Strut, and then looking out into the Castro on the top. And then we have the Harm Reduction Center, which is our syringe access services site. We also have our main building. There's a photo of that later. That's at 1035 Market Street, which is right on the street where all the parades happen. The Giants won the pennant, like they won the World Series the first year I was here. So I got to see that right from the window of our office. It's pretty awesome. But we also not just have people come to us, we take our work to the streets, to the people on the street. So we have mobile health services, mobile syringe access services. We have a whole program that walks around our city and picks up used syringes. You can actually 7 days a week put in a ticket like on your phone or call, and someone within 30 minutes will come and pick up used syringes. So we do a lot in our community. I'd just like to put these up to show kind of how successful the work that we do in our community is. We don't have 2020 or 2021 data there because the pandemic kind of put a halt to a lot of services, and that data isn't maybe it's just not the best picture of what was really happening because a lot of people stopped getting tested. So, but until then, rates of new infections in our city were dropping dramatically. What happened in 2014 was that we introduced PrEP, which is a pill that you can take that prevents you from getting HIV. And then here's a little snapshot of a lot of the work that we do. So we see a lot of clients. We do a lot of intensive work with a lot of people. And before the pandemic, 3,400 people annually volunteered with our organization. Most of those people I engaged, so it's a lot of people. So now we're to the nuts and bolts of this. So I want to say 5 years ago, we were struggling with, we have the largest syringe access services, which if you don't know what that is, it used to be known as needle exchange. We have the largest in the country. And we provide free supplies to folks that are using substances that help prevent them from contracting or spreading illnesses like HIV or hepatitis C while they're using. So someone who's accessing our syringe access services might come in and get syringes. They might come in and get Brillo for pipes. They might come in and get cottons. They'll come in and get, we give medical supplies like Band-Aids and all kinds of things for people who are actively using substances. Everything that we do is evidence-based. It helps prevent the spread of HIV and hepatitis C, but it's a lot of supplies. And so we had this ongoing need for assembling these supplies. So people can come in and we would put together a bag of supplies, but people would take a bag of a whole bunch of supplies they didn't need just to get that one syringe or that one thing. So we kind of assemble things and put it buffet style so they can come and take and get what they want. Getting all those supplies together, an example of one of those things is to put little tiny cotton balls into little tiny Ziploc bags. Another thing that we do is we take rolls of Brillo and we break it down into small bits, roll it into really small, like marble-sized balls, and allow people to get 1 or 2 of those when they come in and access our site. Those things take a lot of work, and we have trouble keeping up with those supplies. I became a syringe access services volunteer, kind of to learn more about the program and what was going on in our organization, and to make sure I could support our volunteer leaders and kind of know what it was like to be a volunteer in our own organization. And so as I was volunteering and trying to assemble supplies while I'm trying to give client services to people, I remembered that I had attended a group. So we have group volunteers who came once a week through Hands-On Bay Area. If you're familiar with Hands-On, we have Hands-On Bay Area here, and that they put an event on their calendar for us, and they would send people to us every Wednesday night who would come and assemble these supplies for us. It was just for an hour or 2 on a Wednesday night, and it was great, but we weren't really keeping up with the supply demand. When I attended those meetings, I would attend those events. I would attend, and I would do the thing, roll the Brillo, stuff the cottons, put together the Narcan kits, whatever it was. There was always a syringe access services leader there who would not just teach me how to do the project, but spent the entire time answering my questions, answering the questions of all the other volunteers, talking about the evidence-based work that we do, educating folks on harm reduction, and the volunteers loved it. I loved it. The volunteers loved it. The same volunteers would come back week after week. There would be waiting lists for this event. Syringe Access Services does direct client care, and they're always, working really hard to make sure they're taking care of clients, and having the time to do these events, it was hard for them. And so after I went to one of those events, I started volunteering myself as a volunteer at the site. And then suddenly having all these corporations come to us and ask, what can we do? We want our employees to volunteer. Can we send them to volunteer with you? And I was trying to send them to our few one-off events that we have. The light bulb went off, and realized, well, we always need these supplies. We never have enough of these supplies. These corporate groups want to come in and support us. Why don't we schedule them to come in and work on these projects? So I started doing that, and I learned to be the educator and to talk to people about the work that we do, and kind of bring them on board with serving people who use substances, because that can be tricky. A lot of people don't want to feel like they are enabling or helping people to use substances. It's not about that, which I won't go into all that, but I've been able to, as a volunteer and an advocate for the work, kind of explain the science behind it and how it really does promote health, and how it reduces HIV and hepatitis C infections in our community, right? And, it started with a few, and then word of mouth. And then the next thing we know, more people are coming to us wanting to host for their organization, wanted to host sites. So we started doing a lot of, and by a lot, I would say maybe 4 to 6 corporate groups a month, which is really time consuming. It takes, you've got to have everyone sign the waiver. You've got to get everything ready. You've got to get the supplies ready. You've got to do the setup, the tear down. It was a lot of work for me. And so me and the development team started kind of thinking, well, maybe we should ask for money. Maybe we should ask them to donate to help us, to kind of defray my time. But we really weren't sure how. We really weren't sure how to do that. And I happened to go to a breakfast hosted by the San Francisco Business Chronicle that brought nonprofits and corporations together in a panel session. And it was corporations up front on the panel and all nonprofits kind of sitting in the audience. And I will never forget when, I don't remember the question, but it was something about volunteering and corporations wanting to use volunteer activities as employee engagement for their organizations. And it was someone from Oracle said, we set aside money for all of these events up to $25,000. And if the nonprofits, if you would just ask us for that money, we would give it to you, but you never ask. And so we save it for the next. And a lot of us like turned around and were looking at each other like, wait, what? Like those of us in volunteer management just hadn't thought we should be asking for corporate dollars. It's enough that they're volunteering for us, and that is great. But another light bulb went off, and I went back to the development team and I said, we have to start asking for money, and a lot of money. It grew from there. And I want to say that I advertise or that I do a lot of recruitment, but I don't, because pre-pandemic, just by hosting really, really relevant, really interesting, engaging opportunities for volunteers, it kind of grew on its own. We have, before pandemic, I was starting to do up to 4 groups a week and bringing in about $200,000 annually just by asking for a little bit of cash to augment or supplement or be a little bit more impactful. And what I learned was that companies, businesses do understand that me taking the time, or my organization taking the time to provide that volunteer opportunity, does cost time and resources, and that they are willing to spend the money because they understand that it is important to their employees to have volunteer opportunities, and that it is important for us as a nonprofit to earn a little extra money. I like to talk about the things that I do, the keys to success. This slide is one of my favorites. I do, these are real people. I think this was Uber. I think this was an Uber activity in the photo, but we get a lot of volunteers just love to come and do this and come again and again because they get so much out of it. And I do a survey. I do a lot of surveys to make sure that we're kind of doing things in a relevant way. And it's almost always positive feedback. When it's not, I try to address it, and I try to make sure I make adjustments so that our volunteers and our corporations are having the best possible experience. Steps to building a program. I wrote this, but I didn't do it. So I wrote these steps kind of after I designed this program, because I did not put thought behind it. It just kind of one thing led to another. I didn't really fully know what I was doing. So just kind of this one thing happened, and then we moved on to the next thing. But I learned from it, and we had to kind of rebuild here and there. And so things that I learned that make it more likely for it to be a success is to write a proposal. I highly recommend drafting something in writing, an outline, or just, hey, I attended this webinar, this seminar, and learned that this is something that can be done. How can I do that? And who can be involved in this program? How could we maybe pilot this and make it work? So I would write some kind of outline or proposal. Establish a team of people. And designate a leader. I am the leader of this. I have kept this program running through many different employees and many different departments, programs, development. There are a lot of us on the team, but those have all been different people. I've kind of been the one person who's been the same throughout this process. So I would designate a leader and have that person kind of make sure there's always the right people in the right roles, and put, not people, but players. So create roles in your proposal and write them up. Like, we always know there will be a development person on the team, a programs person on the team. It may be different people, but we've defined the role. And do a budget, because there is cost to it. Your time is valuable. If it's you running the events, do a budget, because later that's gonna be helpful to you when you're trying to do an ROI. You're trying to show that it does bring in, there's benefit to it. After you've written a plan and you execute the plan, after you've written it, I highly recommend getting executive buy-in. Again, I did not do that. I had the authority, I guess you'd say I had the authority and the ability to just do this, because I felt that in this organization, in my role, it was important to do it and it was beneficial to the organization. So it's not that I went rogue because I had, permission to do it essentially, but I just kind of said, this is important. I think we should do it. I'm going to do it. What that meant was I was kind of on my own, leading this team of people, but I didn't really have a lot of support from executives. And so when I needed things, when I needed support or more resources, I couldn't get it. So I do recommend writing up a plan in advance and getting executive buy-in from the get-go, at least for a pilot of this kind of engagement. And then once you've got all that, you do have to reevaluate. Sometimes you try something, it doesn't work, and that's okay. Then you've learned something and you can try something different. Update your plan regularly, and always have a contingency plan. So something that we haven't done well here, because we're kind of short-staffed right now, is that I'm running every event, and if I get sick, there's no backup plan. I don't recommend that. We're working on that. But if you have the Uber CEO, which has happened, the Uber CEO has come in to volunteer in one of these groups in our organization, and I call out sick that day and there's no one else to fill in, that's not going to create a good experience for the corporation and for your volunteers. So always have a contingency plan. Recruitment. So you've got your plan in place. You've picked a project that you're going to do. You're ready to rock and roll. How do you get people to engage with you? Start with your current volunteers. I have a highly engaging newsletter that goes out to over 1,000 volunteers, former volunteers, prospective volunteers. So I am often posting in that, in social media sites, on our website. We have a corporate link for anybody that's interested in corporate volunteering. Engage your board members, donors at your events. I do, in the early days, I would go to a lot of community events, because we are in San Francisco. A lot of big multinational corporations are headquartered here. A lot of them have a lot of LGBTQ ERGs. We would get invited to participate in a lot of their events. Going to those events, talking about what we do, encouraging people to get involved with us. But I will say that once you've started this, if you create a really engaging, really interesting sort of volunteer opportunity, a lot of that stuff won't need to be done, because in your community, it'll get out there by word of mouth. I want to say that it's really important not to make stuff up. So I'm sure I'm not the only volunteer leader this has happened to. I know I'm not, because I've talked to lots of others that have had this happen to them. Your advancement team, your development team comes to you and says, Twitter wants to volunteer with us. They want to volunteer during this week. Is there anything they can do? You have no projects that need to be done that week. You have no events coming up, but they say, Twitter wants to donate money. They will only do so if you produce a volunteer event, make something up, have them come and volunteer. That didn't happen with Twitter, by the way. I'm just using them as an example. But that's happened to me over the years. And when I always try to say no, if no is not an option. I will make I have done it. And I will say that when you make stuff up and you're just trying to make the corporation, the organization happy, they feel it, like they get the vibe. They kind of really know that this wasn't a real project. I have had people come to me and say, hey, we want to come and paint your office space. Like we'll come and paint for a day, or we'll come and do landscaping. We'll do, and I'll be like, well, thank you. I'd love to have my office painted. Can you make it like sparkly gold? But that absolutely does not push forward our mission. And that may feel good to them, but for us, it is important that all the volunteer work goes directly to our mission. And so whenever, that's not happened very often here in this organization, but it does happen very often that I will say, listen, the projects that we have are harm reduction projects, you know, unless you can come to this event on the specific day or time, the only thing we have is rolling Brillo, and that goes into a pipe for people that smoke crack, or putting together Narcan kits, which is real medication that goes into a kit for people that are using opiates and might overdose. So you have to do these projects. If you don't want to do these projects, there's really nothing else for us to do. But I promise I will help you understand how this is beneficial to the community, how it is evidence-based, how it does save lives, promote health in the community, and is a really, it ends up being a feel-good project. Like I promise I can make that connection. But if you make it up, they might not have as great of an experience. It may be uncomfortable for them. And what I've learned in recent years is making people uncomfortable is okay. It's disruptive to their daily life. It makes them think. It might make them vote a different way. It might make them support your organization when they never would have thought of supporting it before. But in fact, I just attended a seminar recently that talked about that, about it's not about making the volunteers feel comfortable. It's about doing work that may feel uncomfortable, but is really important and impactful in a community. So I say find a project that really does meet your mission, and don't make stuff up. Also, try, when you have any projects, make sure you can measure the impact. So whenever we do something like we assemble Narcan kits, those are kits that go into people's pockets. They carry around. If you see someone who's had an overdose and is literally dying, you can give them this medication and it prevents them from dying. So when a group of volunteers can come and assemble those kits for us, I measure that. I count how many volunteers, how many hours. We all do that, I know. Sometimes I'll translate that into how many dollars your hours are worth, if they ask. But I always measure the impact. If it's Narcan kits, I can say you assembled 500 Narcan kits, and that is literally 500 lives that are going to be saved in San Francisco. Or we know that this many of these and such a thing will impact this many clients. I know how much of each item will impact how many clients. So I'm able to report back to the volunteers and to anyone else that wants that information. And I document that. I use Salesforce, and so I've just got it all set up to document those things. Let's see, what else? Another key thing is to ask for the donation up front. At least if you're not going to ask for a donation, set the expectation that someone else is going to contact them to ask for the donation. And I recommend asking big. I now ask for $5,000 to $25,000 per event. And don't fall off your chair, but I've actually gotten $25,000 before. So just for a 2-hour volunteer event. I always tell folks that if they can't donate anything, that's perfectly okay. but explain to them the importance and how it can amplify their impact. What that money, we can share with them like what the actual impact is to our organization for the amount of money that they donate. And we do have a lot of startups sometimes who will say we don't have anything to give right now, but once they volunteer, they become so connected to your organization that they will return to volunteering. And at the point that they become a public company, or now they're making money, you're going to be one of the first organizations that they decide they want to donate to. So establishing relationship, sometimes it's not about the money. In fact, in my mind, it's really not about the money, but I think me not making it about the money helps bring the money in. Make sure that people are comfortable. I know if you're outside and the weather's, there's various kinds of weather, you can't make everybody happy all the time, but I try to make people comfortable. And then it's really important to connect people from the project that they're working on to the mission work that you're doing to their community. I always, even if it's an event, we educate people a little bit about our organization. And what's really impactful about my group is that, or my groups are that we're usually sitting in a room kind of around a table assembling supplies. That gives us the opportunity to discuss our work. And because most people don't know what harm reduction is, most people, for them it's new, we can have really good, really great kind of discussions about our work and really get people connected to the mission. Every group that I run looks a little different because different types of people ask different kinds of questions. Some people want to know about our funding. Some people want to know about our hepatitis C program. Some people want to know all about HIV and AIDS and how treatment, how we treat people these days. There's just a lot of different kinds of questions that people ask. So every group is different. And it makes it kind of unique to each group. And they appreciate that. I don't have a canned sort of list of things I talk about. It's just always a little bit different. I do like to share client stories when I can. We do not bring clients in to these events. We're very protective of the people that we serve. People that we serve tend to come from highly stigmatized communities, people in the LGBTQ community, people who are using substances, have a lot of different experiences with people, and we just don't want to put anybody in a situation where I've been in group settings where people don't like the work that we're doing. They're volunteering for us, but they're here because their employer told them they should come, and they're not big fans, and they've said some things or behaved in ways that we would never want a client to be exposed to that. So clients do not participate unless it's through video. But people do want to hear stories and do like to hear us talk about real life client impact. Not just that, you're saving 500 lives. Maybe they want to hear about that one life that was saved. And we have a bank of videos and kind of client stories approved that we have developed over time that we'll share. One of the really key things to do is make it easy. So we are high tech, low barrier. Everything is online. No one has to have, no one has to do anything but sign the waiver. Now, I wrote this before we implemented our COVID-19 vaccination rule. So it's not quite as low barrier as it used to be, but we communicate up front so that no one is signing up who doesn't already have their vaccination. So they know up front, hey, if they're not vaccinated, this is not an event for them. So it's important to just communicate expectations up front. We found that competition was a really valuable tool. So especially in June, we will be inundated with all kinds of organizations that want to volunteer during Pride Month. During one of those months, we happen to have both Uber and Salesforce volunteering for us. And so we're like, hey, Salesforce, Uber's going to send, 100 to 200 people to volunteer for us. Do you think you can match that or meet that? And and see who can do the most, who can send the most people, do the most hours. And I think that week that they all came, I don't think we've ever had as much work done as we had during those weeks, because Uber was going to beat Salesforce, and Salesforce was determined to beat Uber. And that time Uber won. I think the next year Salesforce won. So, and that is actually the current Uber CEO. They did come and volunteer with us. And that was another great marketing tool. So I can never pronounce his name, but he actually posted on Twitter about the event and gained some traction for us with other organizations. And he assembled supplies for people that use substances. So it was pretty awesome. We have established relationships with all those organizations. So like the whole Uber thing started with one Uber employee coming to one of our events, thought it was amazing, and went back to Uber headquarters and told all his colleagues about it. And then different groups from different parts of Uber started contacting us and saying, hey, can we come and volunteer? Because you're just down the street, and we heard it was great. And then maybe it was the finance group would come, and then the next time it was a marketing group, and then by word of mouth, it ended up culminating in that event where all of the executives from Uber came and volunteered with us during that week. Uber then started a partnership with us where they provide free rides to our clients, and it's been extremely financially helpful to our community, and also just a great resource. If we need volunteers to do something, I can usually make a connection with someone at Uber, and we can get people to come and volunteer with us. But also once you've been successful with one, especially a big name corporation, others tend to follow. So if I'm talking to a startup or a company that's reached out to me that maybe is feeling a little wary of supporting, a harm reduction kind of project, I can be like, look, Uber, Salesforce, Airbnb, Flexport, Chase Bank. I can list off all these organizations who have actually done these projects and kind of help them know that, oh, it's okay it might be okay to do that project. I think thanking the volunteers and sharing the impact, I think, is really key. Thank you email goes out next day, if not the same day. In that thank you email, I took a little short kind of class on how to write an appropriate email. One thing I like to share with people is it's not a good practice to be like, we at San Francisco AIDS Foundation are so grateful to you. Start your emails with you did this amazing thing. Center the person that you're thanking. So all my thank you emails are like, you did this amazing thing. You did a project that will save 500 lives, all about the person you're thanking. In every email, I have a call to action, which is usually sign up for our newsletter, or if you want to do more, you can sign up for these events that are coming up. I try to take pictures at most of our events of the folks volunteering, and then I will put that in their thank you note. And I always have a survey, and I look at that. Not a lot of people do the survey, but usually a few people from each event do the survey. So I can make sure that we are hosting events that feel impactful to the volunteers. And then of course I always put a donation link on there so people can make a personal donation. And something new that we're doing is we've had palm cards made so that at the event we can be like, scan this QR code right here and make a donation if you'd like. And I'm getting QR codes made so that they can do the survey right from the event. If you catch people at the time of event when they're so connected, that is the best way to get them to do surveys, to get them to sign up for things, to get them to engage more is at the time of the event. And then it's really important, I think, to measure the impact. Like I said, I track all the things that are done so that I can report back. I think it was Salesforce just came to us recently to do a grant, And you know that a lot of times these days when corporations are thinking about giving grants, they want to know how you're engaging volunteers in your organization, and they may really specifically want to know how you're engaging their employees as volunteers in the organization. So that's why it's important to kind of track all that information, measure impact so you can show your CEO or your executives the return on investment. So, you know, when I'm bringing in, you know, $200,000 annually, well, I'm basically paying for myself and for supplies and a lot of other things. And track your volunteer journey, and I've not been good about that. So what I've not been good about, because I haven't had the best technology, is the number of volunteers who attend one of those and then becomes a donor and then becomes a volunteer. So I can find that information. It's just kind of hard for me to do because I don't have a good technology yet. I just got new technology that will help with that. But that is a really powerful story. At the point I was able to document and share with the executives that this program was responsible for bringing in the $150,000 and more, was the point where I started to get resources from my department. So until then, I'd been asking for help, asking for a coordinator and assistant, and I was never not getting it, even though we were just doing so much with volunteers. And when I was able to like document all of that, the next time I asked for an assistant, I got one.
Hey Jody, sorry to interrupt. It looks like Elotsi might have a question.
Sure.
Hi Jody, I was just wondering for that survey that you give out, what has been the most prevalent improvement that you've implemented from that? Like what have your volunteers communicated to you that in the space they'd like to see different?
Oh, great question. So I'm very passionate about what we do here, and there have been times where I have been not as sensitive to people that might feel triggered by doing something that's uncomfortable to them, and did not give people sort of the space to opt out or share with them what they might do differently if they were feeling uncomfortable or triggered by the conversations, or it just wasn't their thing and they kind of showed up not realizing that. So that was really big. And I now communicate up front before the event even starts to the event leads. And then when people walk into the room, I let them know what we're doing and make sure that they understand that it's okay if this doesn't feel right or doesn't feel good. There's lots of reasons why it might, and here's where you can go, here's what you can do. That's something different. And so that was a real eye-opener for me. And it really was just, I'm just so passionate that I think everyone should believe in it. And I forget that, it takes a little bit of education and help for some people to understand how important and really good our work is. Those surveys, they really are a key to making sure that your volunteers are having a good experience.
No, yeah, thank you.
Anyone else want to ask a question? So I think I've covered most of these already, but since the pandemic has started, we're kind of back to it's one person doing this, and it is really hard. We are growing again. We're getting more and more interest again. It all really did shut down. We did pivot to virtual. There after the initial surge of people like, oh, we can't come in, but let's do a virtual opportunity. We did that for a while, but after a while, everyone just got tired of Zoom. And so that kind of fell off. What we did is we just kind of included the educational piece And if people really wanted to assemble the supplies while they were on the Zoom, they had to order the supplies themselves. I started out by shipping supplies to people, but I just couldn't do it. It was just too much. There might be 50 people in a Zoom, and that's 50 different addresses to send things to. So, you know, we made do by making everyone order their own supplies individually, and I gave them a list of what to order, or we gave the leader a list of things to order and let the leader distribute it to everyone. Or I shipped supplies just to the leader, the group leader, who then distributed it to everyone. And then we would just tell them, here's the address to send your supplies back. What happened the first few times that I shipped supplies out, none of those supplies came back. So we had to like, hey, we're happy to do this, but your donation is going to be you getting your own supplies, and then I'll show you how to assemble them. But it's these events happen to work best kind of in person. Yeah, don't ever let it be a one-person job. It's just really kind of too much. Flexibility, I think that was on another slide. Flexibility, I think, is how we really gain success. And that as the director, I'm not doing the day-to-day volunteer management. So we had a couple different programs with volunteer managers, and they were doing the day-to-day volunteer management. And my job was kind of the overseeing all of that. I had to create all of the structure, do all the risk management, because that hadn't been done before I got here. So I was, you know, doing a lot of stuff, and I saw this opportunity here and I kind of ran with it. But if I walked out of here today, right now, there's no one to carry on. So definitely have a team of people with different people who are able to lead and to carry on if you're not here, because it can be really lucrative. Change is constant. So even kind of once I kind of found my rhythm and figured out the best way to manage these groups, I started having corporate groups say, hey, we don't want to bring all of our people down to your office. Can you just come to us? And I was like, okay. So I bought this big, huge suitcase with a roller suitcase, put the supplies in the suitcase, and I started going to the headquarters of other corporations kind of in the downtown area. And it ended up being actually really helpful. There's a lot of benefit to it. If you can take the show on the road, you get 10 volunteers who sign up, but then 50 people are walking by the window of the room you're in, and they're curious and they're asking about it, and they're picking up your palm card, and they're like, hey, maybe we'll do this next time. It gives you exposure that you wouldn't otherwise have. So, you know, if 10 people are interested in coming down to 1035 Market Street because they happen to love your organization, that's great. But if you are at Salesforce headquarters, or at Ease headquarters, or you're at different headquarters, and random people are walking by and seeing, they want to know what your organization is about. It's a really good way kind of to generate more interest in your organization. Something else I didn't do in the beginning was I was building this program. I was making sure it was sustainable. It kept going despite, you know, lots of different employees leaving and different roles coming and going. I was kind of the one that kept it going and made it successful, but I wasn't telling anybody. So like my boss knew, but I wasn't really kind of sharing it with the organization. And finally, one day I got this great feedback from someone, some important organization. And I thought, I'm just going to share this with the CEO. And the CEO was like, well done. And so the next time it happened, I was like, okay, sharing it with my CEO again, and then sharing it with my boss, or sharing it with, you know, the entire organization. Look at this feedback that we got about our community. You know, it's okay to share your wins with the organization. And again, that helped establish more visibility in the organization. People really didn't understand the impact of the work that I was doing, that this program was doing, until I started being like, I know you don't see us in this room over here doing this thing, but this is what's been happening. And this is what the volunteers, people in the community are saying about us. Highly recommend sharing your wins. And something I didn't do in the beginning was include volunteers in the team, because we schedule these like at random times. It's not like I can hire a volunteer that can just come in on a Wednesday at 10 on one week and maybe the next week come in on a Tuesday and a Thursday at 11 to help me, or even a group of volunteers. So that's kind of been a work in progress. I do that now. I make the project leads do a lot of the work, and I have volunteers who help with these. Whew. That was a lot. Are there more questions?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jody. I'd encourage folks and invite people to unmute and ask any questions or post questions in the chat if you'd prefer not to talk. But yeah, invitation open for folks to ask Jody for some inspiration on her expertise.
I'm curious for myself. So I'm currently studying business management at the University of Arizona, and so when I graduate, I hopefully want to work in nonprofit, and your work really speaks to me. And I'm just thinking about like, so how did you enter this? Like, where did you start? Just a little bit background more about yourself.
In this business or here in this organization?
Just like in nonprofit work.
There is no school for being a volunteer leader. No one, I feel like I shouldn't say that. Not a lot of people just graduate and decide to go into volunteer management. We kind of all seem to come from a lot of different backgrounds, but we have a lot of skills. So I started out as a social worker in Chicago. I just did that for a few years and I burned out very quickly. And randomly, after having a child and wanting to kind of stay home with that child and raise that child, happened to find a job in volunteer coordination in a hospital that my child was a patient in. And I thought, well, I think I want to try this. And turns out I was great at it and I loved it. I only stuck with it for a couple of years because I had a second child and she required that I stayed home with her. She's a lot and she's a mom now and she's getting her due. But during those years, I went back to work in that same hospital, not in volunteer management, but I worked in the ER for 10 years. And because I had volunteer leader experience, when that emergency room, which was freestanding, decided to become a full hospital, they recruited me to create, build, and run a volunteer department for a new hospital. And so I learned a lot and I loved it. It required creativity and business acumen and leadership skills. And I learned so much and I just really enjoyed it. And that was, I don't know, 15 years ago. And I just have always appreciated working in the nonprofit arena. It was a nonprofit hospital. And then I came here. I landed here randomly. It was a weird life changing event. Best thing ever happened to me.
Yeah, that's really cool. Thank you.
Yeah, it definitely seems like volunteer managers take non-linear paths to their nonprofit volunteer kind of leadership. Very interesting. Thanks, Jody. And thanks to Yolotzi for that question. There was a question in the chat from Meredith. When corporations don't have a budget, how much do you typically budget internally to cover a volunteer activity?
I don't count. So in the budget, I don't have a line item for like my hours, the hours that I spend, my time. But I do budget $50 to $100 per event for food supplies. We are, the supplies that we have our volunteers assembling, we are funded by DPH, by various grants. Those are purchased through these grants and funds. So I don't have to go and buy those supplies. There are some projects where sometimes I have to buy supplies, but I keep it low key. $50 for food and drink. When we've had events where I've had to ship supplies, I hire Lug. You know, Lug will come here. It's like, if you don't know what Lug is, it's Uber for moving. So you just schedule it in a couple hours. They show up with their truck, pack up your stuff, and they'll take it to the next location. And I'll budget up to $250 for that. If I have to hire Lug, if I have to go to some headquarters and I have to pay for transportation to get there, you know, pack up my suitcase and drive over there, I require that the organization donate money or cover the cost.
Awesome, thank you. Andrea had a question.
Yeah, Andrea, yep.
Do you want to go? I know you wrote it.
Sure. Yeah, I wrote in the chat just for the heck of it. But I appreciate you just sharing a little bit, but because I've worked in nonprofits for a lot, so I've worn lots of different hats, and I often volunteer for different things. So I'm kind of in a position, I'm a membership manager, but just kind of finished making some modifications to our volunteer program because we are highly volunteer run at our organization. We need more volunteers. But so I was just kind of wondering about your paper trail, because that's kind of where we had a process, you know, and I made some edits to that. And really what I'm thinking of is kind of like the internal sharing of information, you know, things that we don't want shared out, that's kind of like private, confidential stuff. And we kind of have a member level, if you will, because our people are members, but they're also volunteers. The members are the volunteers, basically. So they come into our organization to get trained and mobilized at the same time through those events that we're kind of putting on. Some are free events, some are not, but like the volunteer opportunities, and it's a really low paying, I mean, it's only $10 to be a member. So, but anyway, so that's really where I'm just kind of curious what paperwork you guys require. It sounds like you said in one sense you're just a waiver, but if there's any other information that you track on your volunteers, just for, I think for engagement purposes, really, you know, to know how you can better use them and get them involved, you know, in things that they want to do. That's really what we're trying to do, is get people involved where they're interested in using their talents.
Y'all love that question. We haven't been doing the best job of documenting, keeping all the paper things that we should keep. I will tell you that I've always sort of had an HR file, not HR, but I have always had some sort of file or document on volunteers, right? So it's all electronic now. I don't have a file, but every person has an account. And you know, we are like HR in this world because people get fired. I've fired volunteers. I've had to fire volunteers for cause. We have to have people who are trained in HIPAA. And if you break HIPAA, you're breaking the law, right? So all that documentation, we either upload it if it's in paper, or we have it all on electronic signing of documents, electronic documents. And then it's just in our internal system, and we use Salesforce right now. But we do keep track of all those kinds of things. Now, my system is separate from the entire rest of the organization. So if we have a volunteer who is a donor and a client, we don't know. We don't know unless the donor system comes to me and says, hey, this donor says they've volunteered in the past. Can you check on that? And that is not a good practice. I don't recommend that. you as an organization, we as an organization should know the full picture of everybody who engages with us. And so we actually are in the middle of a project, a tech project, where we are bringing everybody together so that, if I, and I do volunteer, if I volunteer for the organization, that is, and I donate. So we'll get the full picture. We'll know I am an employee, I have donated, and I volunteer. These are the things I volunteer at. These are the things I donate to. If I get fired, that it'll be noted in there that I can't ever volunteer again because I broke HIPAA or did this egregious thing. But it's definitely, I highly recommend having the full picture of your constituents.
Well, and I think I like that you bring that up. And so we're actually migrating to Salesforce because we have a CRM, but it's very basic. You can't do a lot. And we have a person that's worked to kind of tweak it and make it do a lot more than it should be. But I guess, shoot, I lost my train of thought. Oh, I had a question. Oh, well, it's gone. I lost it.
That happens to me all the time. If you think of it, just shout it out. It's okay.
A question I had was, like, how do you go about the ask to corporations? So, and specifically, I'm kind of thinking about, like, at the food bank, we have our volunteer opportunities. Groups and teams can sign up for things through our system. We use something called Galaxy Digital and get connected. But basically, I'm curious, like, do you reach out, do you call a business and say, or, Chase Bank and say, hey, we'd love for you to bring a team out to volunteer with us. We've got these opportunities. This is how it connects to our mission. It's a great way for your team to get out here. If you are interested, we also do ask for $5,000 to $25,000 donation. Or is it like that type of thing? Or yeah, how do you go about making that ask?
I missed that, didn't I? That's important. So I don't reach out to people and ask them to volunteer with us because of the word of mouth. It's all me responding to requests for people to send volunteers. But what happens is, who's a recent person? Oh, and also Alex, we need to talk because I just signed a contract with Galaxy Digital.
No way.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's chat.
Okay. So what happens is, someone reaches out to me, usually via email. We have a form on our website people will fill out, and we'll say, hey, I'm with this company. I want to bring 10 people around this time. And I usually will give them a little bit of information in an email, and just a little bit, and say, can we schedule a 10-minute phone call? Because harder for people to say no when you're actually talking to them, but also because of the nature of what we do, it's really, if I just send them a description of, you're going to be supporting people that use substances, they might not fully that might scare them away without really having all the information. So I do just say, hey, yeah, whatever dates they gave, I'll be like, yeah, we're flexible. We have some availability. Let's talk. And during that phone call, I will say to folks, I'll, explain, we'll schedule it whenever it's a good time for you and for us. I'll tell them a little bit about what it's about. And I will always say, we are going to ask for a donation. It can be anywhere from anything up to $25,000. And it's important, it amplifies our impact. It's not required. We do hope that you'll be able to give us a little something. And I'm going to, once we have you scheduled, I'm going to connect you with one of our development team members. And the reason we do that is because I'm not a development person. I am not donor relations. It is not my skill set. Now we've been kind of we've had some of our development staff have left, and I was the only one available, so I had been doing it and had been getting, an average of, I don't know, $3,000 to $5,000 per event. But your development staff are the experts. They know the giving community. They know the corporations.
Sure.
Right? They know that Salesforce can give $25,000 and it's like a sneeze to them. Like they
Yeah.
know these things that I might not know. So I will typically be like, we're going to ask as soon as you're on the calendar, Jenny's going to reach out to you and she'll talk to you about an appropriate donation. If they tell
That's
me,
awesome. I haven't even considered doing that with our donor stewardship team.
yeah, I recommend teeing up the company and just be like, we're going to ask. So as soon as we've scheduled it, we're going to connect you with the development team and the development team will make the ask. Our biggest donations have come from our amazing development team, knowing what to ask, how to ask, or how to, maybe if there's no money on the table, craft some kind of other opportunity, like a sponsorship for an upcoming event. I recommend divvying up the work and giving it to the people that know the work the best. So I'm just not the best at development stuff and asking for money, but a member of our team is. So I let them do that part.
That's great. Thank you so much. That really gets my gears turning.
Oh, when I realized that we had been leaving money on the table and that we could actually be bringing money in and getting all of our supply needs met, it was really amazing. That first time $25,000 came in, it was pretty amazing.
Mhm. Thank you so much. I had another question. Well, I'll wait. Anybody have more questions? I don't want to hog the space. Hearing none. You mentioned about having a really engaging volunteer experience, and you talked a little bit about what that looks like, where there's a bit of education, connecting the work that they're doing with mission impact to the mission of the organization, having an engaging newsletter, for example, and some other digital long-term things. But like, for example, our volunteer services team at the food bank doesn't often directly supervise volunteers, right, who are doing the bag and box production or doing the food distribution. So I'm curious about, like, do you train the staff on how to be engaging and how to do that type of connecting work to make sure that groups are really feeling that impact?
Yes. So we have typically other people leading the groups are people who are working for syringe access services. So they are really dialed in and they can answer questions I can't even answer. When those folks aren't able, or we don't have enough staff, and right now that program just doesn't have enough people to do these events. I have trained other development folks. I had an assistant for a while. I trained him how to, and we did that by him observing how I did it and then kind of modeling that and then like going out on their own to do it. So it's not something that comes naturally to everyone. It's a skill that I have and that I have trained others and kind of doing it in a way that makes people feel comfortable, gets the message across. And it's kind of not hard to do once you've done it a few times. It's your organization and you're passionate about your organization, then it's really not that hard.
Totally. Thank you. All right. We're approaching 5 o'clock. Anybody have any last questions, comments? Thank you so much, Jody. This was phenomenal. It's really exciting to hear about how to engage with corporations and other groups in our community. And hearing your success story is really inspiring.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. I really appreciate being invited.
Yeah, we're honored to have you.
Yeah, just echoing Alex. Thank you for just joining in, and I really appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Awesome. Well, with that, I think we can end a couple minutes early. Aspen, thanks for being here. Randy, Carrie, Liana, Meredith, good to see y'all. Yolotzi, great to see you. And Jody, of course, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day. We really appreciate it, and I'm feeling quite inspired right now. So thank you.
Good. Good. Thank you for having me. And feel free to reach out if you have any thoughts or questions anytime. I'm happy to help others. Always happy to do that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.